All right, welcome. We're here for another episode of Hall Class, and today I have the infamous and hilarious Dick Tannyhil with us. So, Dick, say hi to everybody. So, Dick, tell me a little bit about where you grew up and maybe your parents and some stuff like that.
I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born in Los Angeles in 1931. My father came from Kansas in 1928. I have a picture of him and his mother. They were leaving because he was kind of the baby. There were 5 kids in the family, 2 sisters, which were the oldest. They had moved to California from Kansas. And then he had 2 brothers. And they were, if I didn't have genealogy, I wouldn't know what to say or do, because I found out so much through that. And not from my aunts or my mom or my dad. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't talk about their family. It was like they don't want to talk about it. And I would ask them every once in a while, because at the time, growing up, I wasn't a member of the church until I got accepted to BYU, and I went there for a year and then went in the Navy. And I wasn't very faithful, and I think I was a deacon. They made me a deacon, and that was it. And now at the time, if you join the church, they usually make you an elder or a priest right away.
Priest, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I went up to BYU. I didn't like it real well because I didn't like the cold weather. And the guy that talked me into it was a guy named Roger Sant. And his dad was the bishop. And the way he told me, he said, "I understand that you're going to BYU." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well," I said, "is it necessary that I be a member of the church?" He said, "Well, it sure helps." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." And I remember asking me 5 questions. I remember asking me. And then he said, "Well, I'm going to have Roger baptize you. I will confirm you." And because Roger was made an elder then, going up to BYU. And I said, "Okay, I'm 18 years old." And I said, "Sure, okay." And maybe he spent 5 minutes with me. And they baptized me. My folks took me up to BYU, and I was supposed to meet Roger. I wasn't really close with him. They lived the next block over. That's how I knew, And my mother was a member, but she never went.
Oh, okay, so wait, back up. So I got some questions here. So when you got baptized, you had no lessons, no teaching, you just got baptized?
Nothing.
Okay. And how did you wind up deciding to go to BYU?
Well, I don't think I could have got anything else except City College. My grades weren't that good.
What year was this?
1949.
How'd you even know about BYU?
Know about what?
How'd you even know it existed?
One day, Roger said to me, "Dick, where are you going to college?" And I said, "I don't know, probably City College, and then I'll transfer to one of the other 4-year schools." And he said, "Do you ever think about BYU?" And I said, Where's that?" And he says, "In Utah." He said, I think your mom probably knows where it's at and everything." And I said, "Yeah, I have a lot of family in Utah. I've been up there a couple of times."
Huh.
And she said, he said, "Well, why don't you let me talk to you about the church, and then I'll have my dad more about it." I said, "Okay." So he said to me, I remember they baptized me, and I don't remember, is it a big deal? And the next day, my folks, we got in the car, packed it all up.
Just headed up to BYU.
Up to the Y.
That's really interesting. So tell us about growing up. Tell me a little bit about your parents. What did they do? And growing up, it sounds like you grew up in basically the 40s in LA, and I'm totally curious what that was like.
Well, I grew up in the 30s.
30s in LA.
Yeah. And my mother had 4 sisters that lived there. My dad had 2 sisters, and they're all their families. And the only one that was active was her younger sister. And she married pretty early, and she didn't marry a guy in the church. Okay, and it lasted not that long. Okay, and then it was an older guy. He wasn't very kind to her. I remember that, and the next thing I know, she didn't marry until about 6, 7 years after that. And she married a great guy. He never joined the church, but he used to help her with these projects on the church. And when I got back from after Sue and I married, but let's go back from there. And when I got up to the Y, you know the story about me getting a sandwich at the Cougar Eat.
Yeah, but other people don't know the story. Go ahead.
Yeah, and
tell the story about the sandwich.
And I got a sandwich, and I said, "Do you have any coffee?" And she said, "No, this is BYU." And I said, "What does that have to do with it?" And she said, "Well, we don't drink coffee, you know." And I said, "Okay." And so I said, "Now they drink Coke and everything, right?" But anyway, long story. I came home, and I was going to I had transferred everything over to UCLA. Why, I don't know. And my dad said, "You don't like UCLA?" And I said, "I know, but it was easier to get in than SC at the time." So I said, and he said, "Your good friend Preston's coming over." He wasn't a member of the church, but Preston was a good guy. We used to fish together, and he was just a good guy. And he said to me, I said, "Where are you going?" And he goes, "I just joined the Navy." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "Why would you want to do that?" And he said, "Well, you got 1A draft thing?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "But I don't have to go in for another year." And he said, "Well, why don't you think about coming down with me and see what they've got?" And he said, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I've always wanted to be a dentist, you know." So I went down, and they talked me into it. I signed up. I came back, and my dad said, "Best thing you've ever done, son." You know? And I was very close with my folks. I had a brother that was 10 years younger. We were always close to our folks. I don't know why. They did everything with us. When I was my age, he used to take me to all the SC football games. He'd take me to the racetrack, the things that he did. But I really loved him because he wanted to make sure that I wanted to do this. If I didn't want to do this, that's fine. He even took me one time. This was 1940. Everybody knows the story about Seabiscuit. Mm-hmm. Okay? And the story is not accurate in the movie. He was out for 2 years, okay, with a leg problem. He came back and he was fine. Anyway, my dad took me to see Seabiscuit. There were 70,000 people there.
Wow.
At Santa Anita. And he put me on my shoulders because I was still small at 9, okay? He put me on my shoulders. And we watched the race. And we came home and he said, "Wasn't that exciting?" And, you know. Anyway, the next thing you know, we had what you call ward teachers. Okay, they weren't home teachers; they were ward teachers. And we had this guy, and he used to come every month faithfully. And my dad smoked. Okay, so what he did was he would never smoke around this guy or anything. And he said to the guy said, "You ought to quit smoking, Brother Tannyhil." And he said, "Well," he said, "I like to smoke." And he said, "I'm glad you come around, but don't mention that to me, okay?" Because, well, every once in a while he just kind of dig at him. "Did you quit smoking yet?" or something like that. And he liked the guy, but he said, "There's something about this guy." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, anyway, one day he was at a transportation. He worked for the railroad. He was a freight solicitor.
Your dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he would get guys to, he had all kinds of customers, and he would get the guys to take their line. He transferred over to a Texas company, didn't have to just stay here, and I think he made a lot more money there. But anyway, the long story short, he always stressed that he said, if your mother started going to church, you should go. Well, it didn't happen. And sometimes she'd feel bad about it. What she would do is take me to the Presbyterian church right across where we lived. Yeah. And then come pick me up. Okay.
So she didn't stay with you?
No. And then my brother came along. He was 10 years younger. But then my brother joined the church when he was 18.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I'm at 8. And I'm getting ready to go to BYU. But that's when I thought maybe it'd be a good idea if I joined the church. And then the sandwich at, I asked, about the church doesn't believe in that and everything. But I learned from there. Okay. And then came home, joined the Navy, and was off to San Diego. And I was down here at MCRD after being a dental tech. And then I was kind of anxious. I wish I could get out, to start back to school again.
When did you join the Navy? What year?
51.
51.
Yeah.
How long were you in?
4 years.
Where did you go while you were in the Navy?
Mostly San Diego, and then I was stationed up at it was called, it was right near, it's in Orange County, but it was a air base.
El Toro.
Okay.
Was it El Toro or
El
Tesla?
Toro.
Yeah.
I was at El Toro for 6 months.
That's where I grew up, and the Marine base was still there.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And liked El. Do you remember El Toro Marine Base?
Very well.
Okay. That was a really nice base, but I was always with the Marines. I was at MCRD. I had a Navy uniform. I wore my Marine uniform when it was appropriate. And then they called me. I said to the chief, I said, look, how about I need to go overseas or something, because these people are always teasing me. You come home every weekend. Sometimes you come home for 4 days, So I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I went to the chief and I said, listen, I need a transfer, chief. You've been in 22 years, and he said, you've been on a lot of bases. He said, you need to get around. So they sent me to Korea, okay, on a big ship, and it had 4 high bunk beds.
Oh, wow.
And it took, 10 days or 11 days, and I think I was sick for 10 of them, except that one time I said, I was down in the hole, which is terrible, and it was the worst rocking thing, and everybody was sick all the time. So I said, is there a dentist aboard ship? And he said, yeah, there is. It's up on the top deck. So I staggered up there, and I told him I was a dental tech, and he said, oh my gosh, he said, I need one. And I said, can you get me up here? And he said, yeah, I got a hospital bed with only 2 guys in the room.
Perfect.
I know. And so that was good. And then landed in Korea. I was in Korea for 6 months. And then they sent me to Iwakuni Naval Air Station in Japan. And I was there for 6 months. And then shipped home. And my folks already had me registered at SC, and I started. And I did there, and then I went up to BYU for 1 year to finish up my pre-dental.
Okay.
And then got accepted to, if I'd waited another year, I could have gone to SC. But he said to me, the guy that gets the guys in, he said, look, your grades were so much better, after the BYU. I got C's and a few B's or something. But then I got good at SC, and then had finished up at BYU. So he said to me, look, why don't you think about, he said, our dean at SC was the dean of Loyola, and it's a great school. And actually, I think it's better than SC because they have a lot of wet hand dentistry. It's in a terrible part of town. And he said, you have patients, you can get patients, bang. Just go out there, there'd be 50 people waiting with toothaches or something. And I took his advice, and I got accepted. And I got accepted at Northwestern.
Northwestern?
Too. And I went around all over Orange County asking, where'd you go to school? Found out where they went and asked them. Without a doubt, everybody loved, because Northwestern was, it was in a great part of town. And you had to go out and fight for patients. Didn't have to at Loyola. Mm. And I loved it. I loved dental school.
So you went to Loyola for dental school?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it was right next to Cook County Hospital. And you've heard of Cook County Hospital. We had to go over there every month for a day. I saw cases of things that you never would believe.
So this is in Loyola in Chicago, right?
Right.
So dental school was 3 years, is that right?
Excuse me?
How long was dental school? 3 years?
4 years.
4 years?
Okay. I got out in 58. Mm-hmm. Or no, I started in 58. And then I ended up 62 and came home, took the dental boards. Didn't pass the first time. They tell you, well, going in, they don't want anybody but SC and UCLA. So they make it really tough on you, and they did. Second time I passed, and we had to do gold foils, which they don't even think about doing now. And then I got in, and I remember taking the state board. It was amazing. This guy, I'll never forget this guy that he tested me. And he really was hard on me, and I don't know why. He said, but I got a couple of cases that were kind of tough. Like I had to do one, and the decay was so deep, and I had to base it and everything. And then the next day, I had to do something else, and he got done, and he said, how'd you do on the crown and bridge part? I said, I think I did really well. And he said, I hope so. And he walked away. They don't tell you nay or nay. So I thought, well, I better find out now. Okay, so I packed up my case. We had a big case, so I had to carry it. And I walked out and I stopped him. I said, Dr. Firstman? He said, yeah. He said, what do you need? And he was kind of a tough guy. He said, I said, I would like to know, how do you think I did when you asked me that question? I hope so. Oh, I was just teasing. He said, you did fine. Okay?
Oh, he knew your personality and that you're going to be a big joker as a dentist.
You know who his son-in-law was?
No idea.
Fonzie.
No way.
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right, so I would love to know how you met Sue. Tell everybody about this.
Okay, well, I got out in, 62, started practice, and I worked at 3 or 4 different offices, because at the time, you couldn't afford to open up an office. But I had a guy, when I was in Korea, a dental tech in Korea, the guy he had gone to manual arts, and I went to Dorsey, okay? And he was 3 years older than I was. And he said to me, we used to play cribbage. You ever play cribbage?
No, I don't know what that is.
It's a great, fun game.
Okay, we'll play sometime.
And so we played cribbage about, it seemed like way in the evening sometimes. And we got to be friends. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm hoping to get into dental school. He said, you'll get in. You're just too smart for that. I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Anyway, when I was a junior in dental school, I got a call from him. Okay. And I said, Dudley, I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm practicing, and I want you to think about coming in with me. I said, why? He said, because we had too much fun, and I miss those cribbage games, And he had a family by that time, and he had 2 little daughters. Anyway, I went and was in La Habra, and he had bought the building. His dad had a lot of money, and his dad had bought the building for them. And he and a physician went in, and there was like 10 offices. It was really nice, okay? And I liked him. And but he was also a trust fund baby, and he only liked to work 3 days a week. And I was working 5, and our rent was $200 a month.
Oh.
Fillings were $10, cleanings were $12. It was crazy.
So fillings were cheaper than the cleanings.
Yeah, and so I was an associate for a year. And I said, Dudley, I don't want to be an associate. I was getting 50% of what I produced. And he said, well, tell you what, he said, I've been thinking about it, and I've talked to Jane, my wife. She was a hygienist with him. He said, when you can get up to where you're making $2,500, producing $2,500 worth of work, then he said, we'll do it. And he said, you're going to have to think about getting a receptionist. So I got up there pretty fast because I was working at other places. I was only working there at 3. I worked for the United, whatever it was. I went over to schools that were bad neighborhoods and worked on kids and everything. And then my brother got in, and when I graduated, he came back and he said, you didn't go to school around here, did you? I said, yeah. Terrible neighborhood. All black and Puerto Rican, and never lacked for patience. Loved it. And I think I'm in contact with maybe 3 or 4 guys that are still alive. One guy was LDS. I don't think I went to church twice down there because you had to take 2 L trains and a bus to get there, which would take about an hour and a half. But he became a state president up in Seattle, and I think he still lives. I think he lives to Utah now. But it was just, I just enjoyed the heck out of it that whole time. And then I wasn't married, and everybody says, one day I had to go to San Francisco for a dental, it was a huge dental thing.
Training or conference or something?
It was kind of a, you took a lot of classes. And so I went up there and I thought, my roommate one year was a guy named Bart Christensen. And I didn't like him real well. He was kind of a snotty kid, but he was smart. And when I was he transferred after his second year. He transferred to Stanford, graduated from Stanford, then went on a mission. And so here all this time, I'm, wonder what happened to Bart. So I thought I'll call San Mateo information. And they had a Wendell Bartholomew, which he was a junior. And he said, hey, I called and his mother answered. I said, I don't know if you remember me. We drove him home, okay, after my first year. She said, absolutely, I remember you guys. And so then from there, we had all the guys were inactive, okay, except Bart when we drove him home. And we swore a lot and things like that, and he picked up on that, But anyway, we stayed overnight and then left the next morning. But he, when I called in the convention, I'd been in practice like not quite 2 years. And she said, he's doing a residency at UCLA in urology. And I said, so give him a call. I'm sure he'd like to hear from you. So I called him. And they had 3 adopted kids by then, I think. She couldn't have any children, so they ended up with 6, I think. But anyway, long story short, he said, oh my gosh, he said, I'd sure like to see you. He said, why don't you bring your wife and we're going to have a little get together in my apartment. And I said, I'm not married. And he said, well, just come anyway. So I came and he had brought Sue up. That was her first year teaching she was teaching down the Sweetwater district down here. So got a hold of, she came and I just suddenly, I had been praying about it. I quit doing some of my bad habits and I just started praying about it. And my father had died the year before. And so I wanted to, I stayed with my mom. And that was probably the best thing I did because she was really hurting when my father died. He was only 52 and she was same age. And so I got her I got her a job with a physician. And then I brought Sue up, I think after our 3rd date. I would go down there for the weekend and she would come up here for the weekend. And she'd stay in my brother's room, okay? And I don't know, we just liked each other. It was a fun deal. And she had had a boyfriend from South America, because she used to work up at the Iwani Hotel, okay, up in Yosemite.
Okay.
They'd work the summer, she and her sister. She had a twin sister. And I don't know, I was just, we just hit it off right off the bat, and so this was like October, I'm going to say. And so I said, I really love you. And I said, I think this is kind of serious. And she said, well, I do too. And I said, well, I think we should get engaged. So I had a friend that lived the next block over from me in high school or all the way through school. And her dad was a jeweler, Fred Kane. He was the nicest guy. And I called him, I said, Fred, do you remember me, Dick Tannyhil? I said, absolutely. I said, I'm going to get engaged. And I said, I need to get a ring from you. Well, if you've ever been in the jewelry mart in Los Angeles, you've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's Israel Haven.
Wow.
Okay. He was the only Irish guy in that whole building. They had all the guys downstairs that, tried to sell you this and that and everything. Well, lo and behold, he said to me, I want you to come up to the office. I picked out a ring for you already. And I said, so what's it going to cost me? He said, $1,000 cash. I said, okay. So I went down there and he said, this is a ring. And he said it was a carat. And he said, there was one little fault in it. It was so tiny, but I put the clip over it so you could not see it. Otherwise, it's a perfect diamond. So I said, okay. So I said, I have to go cash a check across the street at Bank of America. So I went over there and I said, do you have I said, I need to cash a check. How much? I said, $1,000. I said, here's my account. And he said, okay, we're going to have to call your branch down there to see if they have the money in there. I said, okay. And he said, I'm going to have to ask you for a quarter to defray the cost of the call. Well, there was two guys standing in back of me. I said, say that again. I said, you're going to ask me for a quarter to call down to Orange County? Yeah, well, that's policy. And I said, where's your manager? He came over and he gave me the same story. They were embarrassed. Well, there were guys in back of me. One guy said, give it to him, please. Anyway, so I got the money. I gave him the quarter. He called. They gave me the money. I went over. They gave me it, and then that was it. And so I waited. I think her brother's birthday was April 1st. And I got it the week before, and I said, let's go out to dinner. I called this friend of mine who was just a hot shot. He ate at every 5-star restaurant in the world, I think. He said, go to Scandia. Have you ever heard of Scandia?
No.
It's closed now, but it was the most magnificent thing. And I said, is it expensive? He said, that's surprising, it's not. Okay, and we got, I remember this, Chateaubriand for 2, and they bring this beautiful beef, and then it's all surrounded by vegetables. It's just wonderful. And then we went, while I was there, I said, in my office, I had, this is really cute, I had this little box of rings and things for little kids. They could open the door and pick out what they wanted. And so I picked out one of these huge rings that had a kind of a collapsible band, that she could put. But I had the other one tucked away, and I said, will you marry me? And she said, yes. And I gave her the thing, and she opened it up, and she said, oh, it's huge. It was about 5 carats, And I said, well, let's try it on. So she tried it on, and I said, well, it's pretty big. I said, well, just bend those. And she bent them, and it broke. And she went, oh. And I said, April Fools. Here's your real ring.
Here's your real one.
And best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever did. She was a wonderful gal. She still is. And I hope she's waiting for me.
She is.
Yeah.
She passed away, what, about 2 years ago?
She's passed away.
About
It'll
3.
be 3 years in April or August 20th.
All right. Where did you guys live?
We first lived, we got an apartment in La Habra, not far from where the practice was. And she got a top job teaching school. She got this before he got married at Fullerton, which was right next town. And she was teaching. She was a home ec teacher. And she came home. We got married in July, the last July 20th. And she started school September. And she had to go for a physical. And I'm 34 and she's 24. I'm not going to, I want to have children right, and she does too. So she came home and she said, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" She said, "I'm pregnant." And so she said, "I'll teach until January, February." And she did. But in the meantime, we were living in this apartment. And she said, "Do you think we ought to try to get a house?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I remember we bought the house. It was $25,000. Okay. And the guy wanted 26, and he was the builder on it. And he just was angry that I got it for 25. And we bought it, and I didn't have to put any down on it because it was a GI. I got it on the GI Bill. And there was a lot of perks about being in the service. I mean, it's wonderful. I didn't dislike it at all. Maybe I didn't, you really appreciate it. And a lady in our ward here, Harriet Jocelyn,
right?
She set it all up for me. I've never seen anything like what a hard worker she was and what a good person she was. And she traveled on the plane with us. My son,
talking about honor flight?
Yeah, we went to Baltimore. And the next morning we took a bus to Washington, D.C., went through all those things. But the best part about it was Harriet got to go all of this, and my son drove down from Boston and stayed with me for the 2 nights. And he was kind of stunned. I never talked too much about the service, and he said, "You really did the right thing," which lots of times kids now don't understand, and most of them will go away if we have a war, so,
Right.
Anyway, it was just, I've had a sweet life, just a lovely life.
You've told me lots of stories about, famous, semi-famous people that you had as clients or patients.
Oh, yeah.
While you were a dentist. Any that stand out in particular to you?
Absolutely. John Forsythe?
Nope.
Okay, John Forsythe was probably one of the most biggest. You couldn't believe it. I mean, he was in everything. Okay, and I think he died about 5 years ago.
Actor? Was he an actor? You said he was in everything. Was he an actor?
Oh, big time.
Okay.
Okay. And one day he said to me, "Dick, what do you do?" And I said, I'd see him at the racetrack. I'd go to the races once a week. And he sat next to me with a bunch of actors and a director, a great director named Martin Ritt. Okay, Marty did HUD, Pete and Tilly, Murphy's Romance. He did a ton of them. The best one he ever did, because he would ask us to come to his premieres, was Sounder. You ever heard Sounder?
I've heard the name. I don't think I've ever seen it.
Well, he was a heavy Jewish guy from New York, and so what he would do is it was always the poor guy. He always had those kind of movies, cause movies, I call them. And he would invite us to him. And Sue she cried all the way through this, and if you watch it, you cry too. And then next, Marty said to me one day, he sat next to me, and the only reason I sat in that box was because Rex Ellsworth, who was a member of the church and had tons of great horses, said, "You can use that on Friday if you want to." And I would work from 6 until noon and then go to the races and then come home. And so I'm sitting there one day and he said, "Dick, I've got some friends coming and I've only got a small box. can they sit in there for a couple of races? I said, oh, sure. So I'm looking at the racing form, and all of a sudden these guys walk up, and Marty says, oh, Dick, this is Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. I said, take the whole box, you know. Anyway, they were the nicest guys. Especially Jack Lemmon did not look anything like he does. He had real small features, and Walter Matthau looked just like he did. And through all of them, we got to be kind of friends. But Jack, who was the first one I mentioned? No, I can't think of.
Forsyth.
John Forsyth. He was telling me one day, he said, I don't know, I had a little TV in my office, and it was only the stock market, and it was sponsored by a place called Jonathan's Coins, okay? And the price of silver started to go up for some reason. This is in 72. And what they were doing is buying, if you've got anything silver, bring it in, we'll pay you for what it's going for. And I told John about it. And he said, Dick, worst thing you ever said to me. I said, what? He goes, my wife has a collection of silver tea sets from all over the world. And I said, well, she can probably get them cheap with this. And he said, and then he called me and he said, thanks a lot. She bought 5 of them. What they would do is melt it down, which was terrible, you know, because these antique things were, you know, worth the money. And so she just bought them. And he had 2 girls that became physicians, and his wife died. He married again about 5 years later. But I think he died, he was about 90. And, but nice people. They were not like, I've got a picture at home of he and in the series he was in with the actress and part of the cast. Because my brother and I had a horse and we ran it and it won. And I said, come on down with me. So they got in the picture. So I have a picture of that. And Sue was with me. And so that was good.
I know you have a great love for horse racing. Do you have a favorite horse memory?
Yes. I had a filly that my wife named. Her name was Astrius. She was out of a mare called Lustrious, who I'd got from Rex Ellsworth. And the reason I got her from Rex Ellsworth is he said, my son, I was good friends with his son-in-law, Bob Kraft. And Bob said to me, you know, we have a lot of assets. You know, we don't have a lot of cash, you know, and because Rex never sells these darn horses when they do well. But he said, we live the United Order out here. And I said, it was only about 20 minutes from my office. Well, what he did, they had 100 acres out there, and he had bought it for like $5 an acre. He used to be the trainer and farm owner, he and his best friend, Ms. Tenny, for Metro Golden Mirror. You know,
Movies, yeah.
He started a ranch, and he got Rex to take care of it and build it up, and then Rex said, I'm going out on my own now. And he bought a stallion from the Aga Khan, okay? And he paid $70,000. He borrowed and stole everything he could to buy that stallion. And it turned out to be one of the greatest stallions of all time. Khaled was the name of the horse. And but they just never sold their horses. And they did well. They won a lot of races. And I can tell you one story they did. It kills me. He had one, there was a race, he had a lot of fillies. And he would enter all 5 fillies in a race. Okay?
Against each other?
Okay. And there'd be maybe 20 horses or 15 horses in the race. And they'd say, Rex, they called him in one day and they said, look, we need for you to take a few of those out because all 5 of them are better than any of these are running. He said, why? And he said, because we got to give the others a chance. Santa Anita is the biggest racetrack in the world, and we need to really give them a chance, okay? And he said, well, okay. And he said, what will you do for me if I take them out? He said, well, we'll give you like $15,000. He said, I tell you, I don't give it to me. Write a check to the Chino First Ward for $15,000.
Tithing, basically, or
No,
donation?
not tithing.
Just a donation?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
I know. They built one of the wards out there with that.
That's awesome.
I know.
Horses paid for a ward building.
Anyway, he was a wonderful guy. But anyway, he sold me this mirror. And he said, we'll work it out in dental work. And I said, well, I got a really busy office. And I said, I could do it on Saturday morning. I could have you all, whenever it needs it. And so it was $8,000. I remember that. And I bred her to some decent horses. And the second one I got was a horse that was voted the best 2-year-old filly in California. I got a big trophy at home and all this sort of stuff. And I'd sold parts of her to a couple of guys. And then I sold her later on. And I was in it. I was in it for the money. I liked the glory, but I was in it for the money. And I sold her, and everything else I'd have, I sold. And Rex named a horse after me, Tannyhil.
Really?
Yeah. And the first race I went to, they were all there and everything. Well, all of a sudden Bob Kraft came up to me and he says, she would win easy, but there's a horse in here that Charlie Whittingham, who was the best trainer out here, has been stiffing. And Judy Garland's husband, Sid Luff, has they've been waiting for this. And I said, what's the name of the horse? Quack. Anyway, it won, and Tannyhil ran second. I remember that.
That's funny. That's funny.
But gosh, I can't. Such a good life I've had.
Well, let's wrap it up. Tell everybody about your testimony of Jesus Christ, your faith in Jesus Christ, what it means to you.
I'll tell you, my wife was the whole thing. I mean, if it wasn't for her, I probably would not be active. But she kind of forced me into it. She said, you got to do it. If we're going to have a celestial marriage, we got to have it right. And as a consequence, I have a really good testimony. I know the Lord lives. I know I talk to him every day and night. And it's sad because the last probably 10 years or 5 years of our life with Sue was, I just wish she'd have been here. We've got all these great grandchildren now, and it just, but I know the Lord is here. I know he's been back of us. He loves us all. We have to show him.
Well, it's sweet. You do have a beautiful life. You've touched a lot of people and made a lot of people laugh along the way, too. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your memories.
Well, something, it's such a blessing to know that he's there. How many times we have a backup? How many people have backups?
It's true.
With the way the world's going now and the hate going on, and he's got to come pretty soon.
One would think. Well, thank you for spending time visiting with me today. It's fun to learn some more stories about you.
I love you. I love you.
We all love you very, very much. Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.